Hello everybody and welcome to the Williams warm-up episode 10. This week is the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, but first we're here in the factory in Grove, Oxfordshire to talk all things Williams racing. So firstly, while we're in the factory, we thought we might as well find out what actually goes into assembling a car and sending it to a race, especially with the busy schedule that we're currently facing in Formula One. So we caught up with Jim Baku, who's the car assembly manager at Williams Racing. Okay, Jim, firstly, thank you so much for joining us here on the Williams warm-up. I guess first things first, just take us through your role and how long you've been at the team with Williams.
So I joined Williams in January of 1991, which seems a very long time ago now. Started off in our gearbox department before joining the race team in 1994. Travelled for 10 years until the end of 2003, which time I joined our wind tunnel. End of 2017, I came back over the road and took up the position of car build manager.
You know, just touching back on, we've just come back from Monaco obviously, and now we're heading to Baku in Azerbaijan. What is the actual process in turning around a car and getting it ready for the next race, especially with such time restrictions as we've got in F1?
Yeah, so it was a very challenging turnaround. We came back, by the time we had the cars back here, it was Tuesday afternoon. They have to then go again Thursday evening. And mainly it's about adapting the car from the different nature of the tracks. So Monaco's a very slow street circuit. We're going to another street circuit, but with a very high speeds. So we have different wing levels. So we prepare different body components and wings for the next race. And also the components on a Formula One car have a certain life and they have service schedules. So it's to make sure that everything comes back and is serviced in accordance to design criteria, and also changing any components out for new ones that are after life.
Throughout the years, you'll have seen a fair few technical changes, legality changes in the F1 regulations. So has that changed the way you prepare a car over the years?
I mean, the biggest factor is just the amount of races now. You know, when I was travelling, we started off with 16 races. It was a very sort of simple format. You know, the race team would travel away with the cars, we would come back and we would turn the cars around. Now we have the car assembly department, which I look after, which starts to service the cars for the race team. We can't expect them to come back and be involved in every turnaround or all of that turnaround because they're away so much now with 23 or 24 races on the calendar. So what tends to happen is the cars come back now, and for the first 2 days the car assembly team will strip them. They will get them all the components off and into the assembly areas for them to be serviced. Crack testing, NDT, any sort of scanning that would need to go onto those components to make sure that they're okay, any proof testing. And then when those parts are ready to come back, the race team come in and they go through the final assembly of the car before it goes out. The other major change really in the years that I've been involved is we used to leave here with complete cars with engines in. Now Mercedes look after the engines, so they're responsible for the engine travelling to each event. And also the ERS battery pack doesn't travel with the car, it travels with Mercedes. So we actually send out now a completely prepared chassis and a completely prepared gearbox, and then when we get to the circuit we actually then build it into a complete car.
One thing to note is not every time the car will come back in full 100% condition, sometimes it'll come back with damage. So how much does that impact your preparations and what do you do in that situation?
It has a massive effect, and that's where we start to lean on everybody within the team. You know, if we've had a major incident or something's happened to the chassis in an event, we need design input to let us know exactly what we've got to do. And quite often we're facing challenges that we've never seen before. So then our design and our stress teams have to look at that, analyse the problem, come up with a robust solution. Those sort of times are very exciting, and we all work together as a team to find that solution and to prepare the cars to the very best ability for the next event.
You've mentioned it's quite a tight turnaround there, so what time frames within that exist to make sure that things go out on time and are ready for that Thursday turnaround?
So the car will come back on a Tuesday. Hopefully the race team have had time to strip the car. That was a challenge after Monaco because of the weather issue in Monaco, so that means the race team have less and less time with the car after the event. If the race team have time to strip the cars, so when we receive them back here, we're in a position where we can distribute the parts out to the various departments where they need to go, so that all of the service and any rework that's required can happen pretty much straight away. If the race team don't get that opportunity, the cars are back here, we will start our day to suit the arrival of the trucks. All of the team straight into stripping any components, getting any damaged components through the various checks that they would need to go through to make sure that they adhere still to any design criteria. And then it's just a case of receiving those components back, understanding what needs paint. You know, sometimes it's just a simple cosmetic repaint. Other times, you know, maybe we've got a brand uplift, slight change to the livery. One of our big challenges this year was to go for our lightweight livery. We started the year with a sort of a full livery, and we've decided to take that option to strip it back. So again, it's dealing with outside suppliers to make sure that the parts get there in time and we can receive them back to us so we can build them. Things like wings take a lot of time for us to build them. And also the race team have very limited time at the track now. With a curfew, it's a very different way of working. So we need to try and make sure that we leave here with the parts prepared to the very best possible standard so that when they get to the track, it's ready for FP1 on a Friday morning.
We've just been to Monaco and Baku's up next, and although they're both street circuits, I guess the car will require a bit of a different configuration. So how much process goes into that while the car's back here and the chassis here in terms of turning that round for preparation for FP1 on a Friday?
There's obviously some circuits that are very similar in their characteristics. So in actual fact, we're going to a double header now, and Baku and Canada are quite similar in their characteristics, but they're very different to where we've just come from in Monaco. The chassis itself doesn't change really at all, and it's just really the aerodynamic shroud that we put on the car, which is the bodywork and the wings, that change the most, along with suspension settings to try and optimise the performance of the car to that particular circuit. Really for us in our department, it's understanding what the engineers and the aerodynamicists want, and then making sure that we have those parts available to go back out. For example, now our very high downforce wings have not gone to the next two race events because they've not been requested by the aerodynamicists. So that's a big change for us. We've gone from a high downforce configuration car to a low downforce one.
What are the biggest challenges you face as a team when trying to turn around for these races, and especially with 23 races? So how does that impact your work here?
It's just the constant challenge of trying to make enough components. We're sitting within cost cap now, so we're not just at the point where we can decide to make 10 of everything. That becomes a great challenge with the amount of events that come at you in such close succession, and we know that we need a certain amount of components to go to each event with, and obviously if you lose some of those components at the previous event, it's about how you use your resource to try and recover from that to make sure that you have sufficient spares for the next event.
Do you see this process changing at all moving forward with more races, potentially being added? Do you think they'll change the way that things are done to make it easier, or what do you think will change moving forward in the future?
I think one of the biggest changes that we've seen is the life of components being extended. Because of the cost cap, you are forced down that route. Your gearboxes and your engines all have to do these multiple cycle and multiple events. It has to be life for much longer periods because something like a triple header, your service intervals of your components have to be extended to suit the calendar.
Well, Jim, thank you so much for joining us, and now let's head to Baku and see how the car's looking out there. Okay, so we are now here in Baku, Azerbaijan, and we've been joined by George Henson. George, firstly, thank you so much for joining us. Can you just take us through your role a little bit and how long you've been with the team and what your role consists of?
So, I'm Head of Engineering Coordination. I've been at Williams 14 years, starting in 2008 in design, spending 10 years doing engine systems design, which is coolers, heat shields, the electronics installation in and around the chassis, and various other elements of the car, the fuel system, quite a lot of the centre of the car under the bodywork, all the stuff that we can't typically show on camera. Then I spent a short period in the transmissions design group, and an opportunity came up to join the trackside race team. I'd already done a few winter tests, had a taste for what it's like in the garage, and fancied making the jump to a full-time role with the team.
Take a look behind us, the cars are here, starting to get put together. What goes into actually getting these cars here, and obviously when they're at the track, how long does it take to put them together?
The garage will be built over the preceding few days before the main race team arrives. The early crew come out to build the garage, unpack all the freight. The chassis is typically unloaded on the Tuesday afternoon, put into the garage once it's built. But really the assembly doesn't commence until Wednesday, and on a Wednesday really the aim is to try and get the engines and gearboxes onto the car by the time everybody finishes for the day. That represents a good day at the office on a Wednesday. The guys then come in this morning to then begin doing the setup work to adjust all of the adjustable elements of the suspension, other parts of the car to suit this track. All the engineers arrived yesterday evening, so this is their first full day at the track. They've gone and done their track walk and understood any changes to the circuit. There'll be an update to the setup this afternoon based on the outcomes of the engineering meeting. But really the mechanics know what they're doing from a Wednesday onwards. That's when they get the initial setup information, how the car's going to be built to suit this circuit.
Yeah, awesome. And as you mentioned there, we build it to suit the circuit, but obviously driver feedback plays a part in that. So how much does driver feedback play a part in how much you alter the cars over a race weekend?
It's really key, especially now with the reduced amount of running that you get in free practice compared with a couple of years ago. We're very compressed, and also the new regulations this year which allow less time between sessions and after the close of running each day. So really it's a case of listening to the driver feedback, looking at the data, trying to find where the feedback correlates to things we can see from the sensors on the car, and making a quick decision for what to do for the next session. Go out and gather some more data and see if we've gone in the right direction to try and fine-tune the car into the demands of each track we go to.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess every weekend will pose its own challenges, but what do you think are the main challenges that you face over a normal race weekend? For instance, if there was damage or anything like that, how much of a challenge does that set you back?
The cars are designed with quick disassembly and reassembly in mind. Obviously, every year we review the sort of year we've had in terms of challenges we may have had at particular events, and we try and incorporate that into the following year as well. Damage can really set you back, but it depends what the nature of the incident is. Every incident is slightly different. If it's just the front wing and nose box, there's no major dramas. We can change that in a pit stop and then have a good look around the car at the end of the session, just to check everything's okay. Sometimes the most benign looking accident can cause the most headaches. We've had seemingly quite a small accident where we might have broken a wishbone and we've ended up having to change the chassis. Really the biggest thing that can happen is a chassis change for us, but we're prepped for that. We carry a spare one. There are a number of curfews across the race weekend, and you get a certain number of jokers for each day of the event that you might incur one of those. So there is the possibility to stay late as long as you haven't used up all of your jokers. But again, we try not to do that. No, we're just trying to have a clean and simple day. Each day we come in and focus on the things that add performance.
Yeah, well, George, thank you very much for joining us. Let's hope for a clean weekend, and yeah, best of luck.
Thank you very much.
Well, a big thank you to George for giving us a really interesting insight on what actually goes into the setup of a Formula One car at a Grand Prix. Now, let's take a look at the Baku City Circuit ahead of this weekend's Grand Prix.
Formula One is back in Baku for round 8 of the 2022 World Championship, which will see us battle on these high-speed streets for just the 6th time. Starting life under the banner of the European Grand Prix, this circuit around the City of Winds has provided many memorable moments in its short existence. Join us as we give you the inside track on the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. Sector 1. A lap of the 6-kilometre 20-turn Baku City Circuit begins with a short blast down to the 90-degree left-hander of Turn 1. During the race, this presents one of the best overtaking spots thanks to the preceding 2.2 kilometre straight. Being an anti-clockwise circuit, one of only 8 on the calendar, turns 2 and 3 are also 90-degree left-handers. However, between them sits the first DRS zone, meaning cars that have just been passed on the main straight will get a near immediate chance to fight back. The opening sector concludes with the first right-hand turn before we power towards the much more technical middle portion of this venue. Sector 2. After the relative comfort of long straights and simple turns, the Baku City Circuit starts to come alive in the central section of its layout. Baku's most unique feature is the complex at 8, 9, 10 and 11. There are heaps of lap time that can be won and lost as drivers weave through the narrowest section on the calendar. On your left is the medieval castle wall, on your right are the front doors of local houses and shops. There is simply nothing else quite like it in the world of motorsport. This area of the city has cobbled streets, not that you know it however, as it's covered in temporary asphalt in time for the Grand Prix. And then you're back out in the open as you curve your way around the old city. Be careful not to lock up going into turn 15 though, its downhill braking zone has caught out many. Sector 3. The final sector starts with the lap's final braking zone at turn 16. After that, it's full throttle for over 2 kilometres. The left-right flick around the maiden tower at 18 and 19 requires the drivers to get as close to the wall as they dare to shave off lap time. From there, it's just the slight kink of turn 20 and the DRS to deal with. Wheel-to-wheel racing here is guaranteed, and battles can go right to the line, as we know all too well. In 2017, Lance Stroll in his FW40 had a P2 finish snatched away from him after a sprint to the line with Valtteri Bottas. The young Canadian ultimately settled for third, not that he minded too much, celebrating his first taste of an F1 podium. The Baku City Circuit is considered a genuine modern classic among fans. For teams, finding the balance between having a quick enough car on the straights without sacrificing too much downforce for the technical sections will be key to any success. With action almost inevitable from lights out right through to the checkered flag, we can't wait to see what opportunities are available this year in Baku.
Well, thanks again for joining us on this episode of the Williams Warm-Up. We'll be back next week when we head to Montreal. But in the meantime, make sure you download the app, sign up for your driver card, and make sure you check out our Canada merch ahead of next week's Grand Prix. See you then.